Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, at a Paris forum organised by UN Women, it's announced political leaders, corporations and activists are now to give $40 billion to advance gender equality. I'll be talking shortly to Anita Battier, the Deputy Executive Director for UN Women, about where the money will go. Also from this month, France is doubling paternity leave to 28 days from 14, making it one of the most generous policies in Europe. And the New Zealand weightlifter who's set to make history after being confirmed as the first ever transgender athlete to compete at the Olympics. But first, Paris has been hosting the Generation Equality Forum, organised by UN Women and co-chaired with France, the event calling for urgent action and accountability for gender equality. It also announced some $40 billion have been raised in new investments benefiting both women and girls, thanks to commitments from governments, the private sector and civil society. The Paris event marking 26 years since the Beijing World Conference on Women. That was where Hillary Clinton, then First Lady, delivered her now iconic speech saying women's rights are human rights. Not surprisingly, she was a guest of honour at the Paris event. It was also where I asked French President Emmanuel Macron what the gathering's main message was.
This is a question of emergency, because this question is not brand new, but it is at stake and it is threatened in a lot of parts of this globe, even in Europe. When you hear some people, when you see basically some increasing speeches and some actions and some new laws, when you see what's happening in Africa and some other regions, it's at stake, so we have to act and accelerate.
Now, with me in the studio is Anita Battier, the Deputy Executive Director at UN Women. Thank you so much for coming in, Anita. First of all, some $40 billion has been set aside to boost gender equality. But at the end of the day, that's a tiny drop in the ocean, isn't it?
We'll take that drop because there hasn't been any large sum of money allocated to gender equality until now. That's what's so historic. It was really the first time we had a multi-stakeholder coalition of governments, international financial institutions, private sector, civil society, activists all come together to make a collective commitment to move the needle. And that's what's extraordinary.
So where is the money going to go?
Oh, gosh, I can think of lots of uses for it, but the multi-stakeholder coalition that actually put together Generation Equality has already done some of the hard thinking. So there are 6 action coalitions, and the money is going to go to address a range of issues that will directly impact gender equality. Women's economic empowerment, women's bodily autonomy, the right to sexual and reproductive rights, technology and innovation, women's leadership, feminist leadership. These are some of the issues to which the money is going to go.
What other gains have been made as a result of all coming together, especially at a period like this where the world is dealing with a global pandemic?
Well, you know, Annette, that last year was a terrible year for gender equality because all of the gains that we have made in the last 25 years were really threatened by what happened last year. Huge spikes in violence, huge drop-off in female labour force participation. So you really need an integrated response and you need a whole-of-society response. The problem's too big to be solved just by government or just by the private sector. And so what's unique about the forum and the initiative is that it brings all actors together.
You and I have talked about in the past that governments in the last 15 months have been in crisis survival mode. There's certainly many have not been putting gender equality as first priority. So it's been very difficult for political leadership to sort of wrap their heads around this issue, hasn't it?
It has. And, you know, our work at UN Women, looking at fiscal stimulus packages, shows very clearly that most governments have failed to put a gender lens on their stimulus packages. And that is what we are calling out today. And we're asking that as governments think about response and recovery and coming out of the pandemic, that they do so with a gender lens. They think about the care economy. They think hard about how to get cash to women-owned businesses. They think about how to get women back in the labour force by paying attention to who's going to take care of their kids and who's going to take on the care burden if women have to go back to work.
Anita, do you feel positive given what transpired at the forum?
Yes, very much so, because we have never seen numbers like this before attached to the gender equality agenda. Look, overall ODA is about 160 billion a year. There's a very small percentage of that goes towards gender equality. So the fact that you had groups of, for example, philanthropy coming together to say we're going to commit $4 billion over the next 5 years, that is remarkable. You had the World Bank saying we're committing to spending $6 billion for legal and policy reform in sub-Saharan Africa. Fantastic. You had governments and other public sector institutions coming together to say we're going to allocate $23 billion over the next 5 years. You heard the commitments from the president of Kenya. Detailed implementation plans. We have never seen anything like this. What's remarkable is that the gender equality agenda is finally getting financed at the scale that it needs.
So therefore it ended on an upbeat note.
It did indeed. We now have the hard job of translating these commitments into real action and implementation. That's where the rubber's going to hit the road. The devil's in the details, but UN Women is going to be the glue that, together with governments, civil society, private sector, and other partners, is going to hold this process together. We will have an accountability framework, we will have indicators, we will report on progress, and we will see change.
Let's pray for that. Thank you so much, Anita Battier from UN Women. Now, from this month, paid paternity leave in France has doubled from 14 to 28 days. Fathers being required to take at least a week off work after their babies are born. France are now joining Lithuania and Spain with one of the most generous paternity leave policies in Europe. Emerald Maxwell reports.
Hassan's parents are thrilled, not only with their newborn son, because they're among the first to benefit from France's longer paid paternity leave, which has doubled from 2 to 4 weeks.
It will allow me to spend more time with my family and our newborn child. And so it also allows me to create a deeper and longer bond with him.
France introduced paid leave for new fathers in 2002, but only 7 in 10 actually take advantage of it. Under the new legislation, fathers will be obliged to take at least 1 week of leave. The bulk of the cost will be borne by France's social security system, to the tune of about 500 million euros a year. But supporters argue the benefits, both for families and for gender equality, outweigh the costs, with studies showing that fathers who take leave remain more engaged in childcare and household chores in the long run. Organisations that have pushed for the law say it's a step in the right direction, but doesn't go far enough.
Eventually, we need to offer the same length of leave to both parents, so the second parent gets as much time off as the mother.
In Europe, Finland is planning to make that goal a reality. Its government announced last year it will bring paternal leave in line with maternity leave, extending it to nearly 7 months. The picture is very different in Germany, Slovakia and Croatia, which offer no guaranteed leave for new fathers. Other countries offer parental leave, in which parents can share the days between them. But in terms of non-transferable paternity leave, Portugal grants up to 5 weeks, fathers in Norway get 15, while Spain currently leads the pack with 16 weeks. EU countries have until August 2022 to implement a directive that sets a paternity leave minimum of 10 days.
And the New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard is poised to make history after being confirmed as the first ever transgender athlete to compete in an Olympic Games. The 43-year-old being selected for the women's super heavyweight category in Tokyo. But Hubbard's inclusion will also frustrate those who believe she has an unfair advantage over her rivals, having gone through male puberty before transitioning in 2012.
It's a seismic decision that's proving divisive. Weightlifter Laurel Hubbard will be the first transgender athlete to compete in the Olympics, having been selected to represent New Zealand in the Tokyo Games.
This is a historic moment in sport and for the New Zealand team.
Hubbard was born male and competed as a man before transitioning to female in 2013. In a statement, she thanked New Zealanders for their kindness and support, continuing that it had carried her through the darkness and get back to the sport after an injury. The shy and softly spoken weightlifter will compete in the women's 87 kilo plus category, where she's ranked 16th in the world. Allowing her to compete in the women's category raises complex issues of fairness, identity, science and human rights, and has made for an often toxic debate.
We do know that there are many questions about fairness of transgender athletes competing in the Olympic Games, but I would like to take this opportunity to remind us all that Laurel has met all of the required criteria.
IOC rules state a trans woman can compete provided her testosterone levels are below 10 nanomoles per litre for at least 12 months before her first competition, a criteria Hubbard meets. But critics say she has physical advantages over female-born athletes from growing up male.
Males do have a performance advantage that's based on their biological sex. That begins in utero, where the testosterone advantage begins. Picking testosterone is a red herring. I mean, we're forgetting about the anatomy, the fast-twitch muscle, the bigger organs. They have faster recovery, they have stronger bones, they don't have a tilted pelvis, so they're less likely to get knee and ankle injuries.
Advocates for transgender inclusion argue the process of transition decreases male advantage considerably, and that physical differences between athletes mean there is never truly a level playing field. The IOC has consistently said it's committed to inclusion, but the organisation is reviewing its guidelines, which are expected to be released after the Tokyo Games.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.